with a reindeer that had a light-up nose. Uncle Rob, her dad's goofy brother, wore a red sweater with candy canes on it, and Cameron and Hayden wore matching elf sweaters. It was all so hideous that Millie feared her eyes would bleed. "Merry Christmas!" Aunt Sherry greeted her, opening her arms for a hug. Millie did not move towards her. "Hello," she said, her voice dripping icicles. "Off to a funeral, Millie?" Uncle Rob said, nodding towards her head to toe with black and purple clothing. He always said this to her, and apparently never stopped finding it hilarious. "I wish," Millie said. "Better to be in an honest, sad environment than a fake happy one. And she would certainly prefer funeral organ music to be forced to listen to Winter Wonderland again." "Millie isn't celebrating Christmas this year," Grandpa said, "but at least she's agreed to grace us with her presence." How can you not want to celebrate Christmas?" Hayden said, looking up at Millie with big, innocent blue eyes. "Christmas is awesome." He had a little lisp that came out when he said Christmas and awesome, which Millie supposed some people would find cute. "And presents are awesome," Cameron said, pumping his fist in excitement. Both kids were so happy. It was like their parents had poured them full of black coffee. Hold on, guys. I just need to check something. Alright, guys, I'm back. I just had to check something. So let's continue. Both kids were so hyper, it was like their parents had poured them full of black coffee. Millie wondered if there had been a time where she got this excited over the holiday, or whether she had always known better. "Our culture is already so materialistic," Millie said. Why do you want more stuff? Her aunt, uncle, and cousins all looked uncomfortable. Good. Somebody in this family needed to tell the truth. Sherry plastered a smile on her face. "Millie, won't you at least have a cup of eggnog? Drinking eggnog is like drinking pilgrim," Millie said. "Really? How had such a disgusting beverage become a part of a traditional celebration? Eggnog and fruitcake both seemed more like they should be part of a punishment rather than a celebration." "What's pilgrim?" Hadrian asked. It's that gross slimy stuff that's in your throat and nose when you have a cold, Aunt Sherry said. Cameron raised his cup. "Yum, egg snot," he said, then took a big showy drink that left an eggy mustache on his upper lip. Millie couldn't take it. She had to get out of here. "I'm going for a walk," she said. "Can we come too?" Hayden asked. "No," Millie said. "I need to be alone." Well, don't stray too far," Grandpa said. "We're eating dinner in an hour." As Millie headed out the door, Grandpa called for her to remember her coat, but she ignored him. All the houses in the neighborhood had extra cars in their driveway, no doubt because of visiting family members celebrating the holiday. All these people acting the same, doing the same thing. Presents, eggnog, and hypocrisy. Well, Millie was different. She wasn't going to participate. Hypocrisy, she thought again, and this time the word stung her. Dylan had said this. This was a hypocrite. Dylan had said she was a hypocrite because she judged Brooke by her appearance. But boys, even boys seemed cool like Dylan, were fooled by appearances. If a conven if a conven if a convention if a conven if a conventional blonde girl paid any attention to them, they'd think she was a saint and a genius rolled into one. No way was Millie a hypocrite. She was a truth teller, and if some people couldn't handle the truth, then that was their problem. After one lap around the block, she was feeling pretty cold, and there was no way she was going back into the house yet. An idea popped into her head. Grandpa's workshop had a little space heater. He always kept running in. He always kept running. It could keep her toasty warm while she waited out the party. He was too busy hosting his lame little holiday gathering to go into his workshop. It was a perfect place to hide. Grandpa kept the key under a flower pot beside the workshop door. Millie found it, opened the door, and pulled the chain on the bare little bulb that lit the small windowless space. She closed the door behind her and looked around. The place was even more cramped with stuff than it had been the last time she was here. Grandpa really must have been hitting the yard sales, flea markets, and salvage yards. Salvage yards. Wait. Near his workbench was a rusty antique bicycle, the kind with a giant front wheel and a tiny back one. There were lots of old mechanical toys too, a metal bank with a clown that flipped coins into its mouth, a jack-in-the-box that startled her when the jester doll inside jumped out, and even though she'd known what would happen when she started turning the crank. There was even one of those horrible grinning monkey dolls that climbed cymbals together. Why did Grandpa want all this stuff? And what did he plan to do with it? Repair it and then use it to culture the house some more? She guessed. The strangest item among many was tucked into one corner of the workshop. It was some kind of mechanical bear with a bow tie, top hat, and a creepy blank grin. That's Funtime Freddy, guys. It looked like it once had been white and pink, but years of neglect it had left it a dingy grey. It was big enough for a person to climb into its body cavity. Don't do it! Like in those science fiction movies where people drove giant robots. The hinges on its limbs made it look like as if its parts had once moved. It must have been a figure from one of those old kids' attractions that featured creepy-looking animatronics. Why had little kids ever liked things that were nightmare-inducing? From outside the workshop, Millie heard laughter and yelling. Hayden and Cameron playing in the backyard. She hadn't thought to lock the workshop door from the inside. What if they tried to come in? She couldn't let them find her. They'd go tell the adults, and then she'd be dragged back into the house and sentenced to mandatory celebration. Millie found herself staring at the old animatronic bear, not just as a curiosity now, but as a potential solution to her problem. She opened the door to the mechanical bear's body cavity. Don't do it! Crawled inside She did it and shut the door behind her. Darkness enveloped her. It was so much better than those annoyingly twinkly lights and garish. Bright bright Christmas sweaters. It was perfect. No one would find her here. She would go back to the house after she heard Uncle Rob and Auntie Sherry's car pulling out of the driveway. So what if she missed Skyping with her parents? Served them right for being so far away from her on Christmas. Kids, time for Christmas dinner. Grandpa called out the back door. Millie, you come in too if you can hear me. Cameron and Hayden came running in, their cheeks pink from the chilly air. Smells great in here, Cameron said. Well, that's because I cooked you a feast, Grandpa said. Ham and sweet potatoes and rolls and your mom's green bean casserole. You boys didn't happen to see Millie while you were out there, did you? No, because she has become one with Funtime Freddy. Nope, didn't see her, Hayden said. Grandpa, why is she so weird? Grandpa chuckled. She's 14. You'll be weird when you're 14 too. Now go wash your hands before you sit down to eat. At the table, Grandpa carved the big, sticky, beautiful ham. I gazed this thing with Coca-Cola, he said. Found the recipe on the internet. I've been looking up a lot of recipes since Millie moved in. Most of them are vegetarian, so she wouldn't starve herself to death. I bought this weird fake turkey loaf thing for her at the grocery store. When she gets back, she can have it with the green bean casserole and sweet potatoes. I keep feeling like we ought to go out and look for her, Sherry said. Or she'll show up when she gets hungry or when she feels like she's made her point, Grandpa said. She and that cat of hers aren't that different. She's just at that age, Now speaking of hungry, who wants some ham? I don't have a sword like Saudi Arabian executioner, silly Millie, the voice said. But I do have a sharp steel of metal I could pass through the chamber. It could pass the level of your throat, or it could hit your lower and bisect you. And bisection is a sure way to go too. Either way, the job would get done. I think it would be smooth like Madame Guillotine, instead of a slow, dull hacking, like Mary Queen of Scots experienced. But I'm not 100% sure this will be my first attempt to decapitation. Yours too. It will also be your last. As the voice laughed at its latest witticism, Millie pushed on the walls of the chamber that trapped her. They didn't budge, but then she saw a tiny crack of light shining through the side of the door. Maybe she could slip a tool or something, into that crack. She could somehow pry the door open. But what could she use as a tool? She took a mental survey of her jewelry. Her earring was too small and breakable, and her necklace was an unhelpful strain of jet beads. But there was the silver cotton cuff bracelet on her wrist. She pulled it off and bent it until it was nearly ruler straight. The end seemed like the right size to slip into the crack into the door, but she was too afraid to test it, too worried at her captor that her captor would notice. "Millie," the voice said, "are you still with me? The decision must be made." Millie thought if she lowered her head, curled up into a little ball, then the blade shot through, it would miss her. She'd have to be quick though, and make sure she'd got her whole head out of the way, or else she'd get scalped. If the blade came through the lower to bisect her, she'd really have to flatten out in the bottom of the small space. "Is there any chance you would just let me go?" she asked. "Anything you could give me in exchange for my life?" "Lamb chop, there's nothing I want from you except your life." Millie took a deep breath. "Okay, then decapitation it is then." "Really?" The voice sounded tremendously pleased. "Good choice. It's a classic. I promise you won't be disappointed." The low rumbling laugh. "You won't be disappointed because you'll be dead." Millie felt more tears spring to her eyes. She had to be strong, but you could still cry and be strong at the same time. "Tell me when you're about to do it, okay? Don't just spring it on me." "Fair enough. I suppose it's not like you're going anywhere." Give me a few minutes to get ready. You know what they say. Prior preparation prevents poor performance." The chamber shook and rattled. Then the animatronic's eyes rolled back outward, away from the chamber. Millie waited. Her heart pounded. Why had she ever wished for death? No matter how hard life could be, how depressing or disappointed, she wanted to live. If nothing else, she wanted the chance to apologize to Dylan for what she said about Brooke, and to ask if they could be friends again. She curled into as tiny a ball she could. Tucking her head under her arms, she hoped harder than she'd ever hoped for anything, than she was low enough to miss the blade. All right, let's do this. "Millie Fitzsimmons, you are hereby sentenced to die for crimes against humanity." "Wait," Millie said. "What does that mean? Crimes of humanity?" "You," the voice said, "have been rude and quick to anger. You have rushed to the judgment of others. You have been insufficiently grateful to those who have shown you nothing but love and kindness." The voice was right. Different incidents of her own rudeness and ingratitude played in her head like scenes from a movie she didn't want to see. "Guilty as charged," Millie said. "But why are those crimes I have to die for? Those are crimes that everybody's guilty for. That everybody's guilty of from time to time." "True," the voice said. "That's why they're crimes of humanity." "But if there's something all humans are guilty of, then why do I have to die for them?" The voice didn't answer, and Millie felt a small tingle of hope. Maybe she wouldn't have to take her chances by curling up on the floor of the cavity. Maybe she could talk herself out of this yet. "Because," the voice said, You're the one who crawled into my belly. Whimpering, Millie made herself as small as she possibly could at the bottom of the cavity. If she got out, she was going to make it a point to be nicer to Grandpa. He really had been good to her, taking her in and putting up with her moods and teaching herself how to cook all those vegetarian meals. Now, in the spirit of the French Revolution, I will now count down in French before releasing the blade. 3, 2, 1! Quick as a shot, the blade sliced through the chamber. Grandpa brought out a platter of sugar cookies and set them on the coffee table. I'll be right back with the hot chocolate, he said. In the kitchen, he finally broke down and called Millie's cell phone. Her phone rang from the pocket of her jacket that was hanging on the coat rack in the hall. Oh well, she would come back when she felt like she proved her point. He hated to think of her being outside without a jacket, though it was pretty chilly out there. Grandpa poured 5 cups of hot chocolate and topped them each with a generous handful of marshmallows. He carried the steaming cups on a tray into the living room. Who's ready for presents? He called. I am. Hayden and Cameron both shouted. Do you think we should wait for Millie? Sherry asked. She's not celebrating Christmas, remember? Why should we? Rob said. Why should we wait for her if she's decided to be a brat? Grandpa didn't like the word brat being used to describe Millie. She wasn't a bad kid. She was just at a difficult age. She would come around. He crouched under the Christmas tree and arranged all her presents in a big pile so they'd be there for her when she came back. Well then, that's the end of Count the Ways. If you guys don't know what happened at the end, Millie died. And it's pretty tragic as well, because I wouldn't really picture Funtime Freddy as the demonic bear himself. But still though, I hope you guys enjoyed that story. I might read Into the Pit. I won't read To Be Beautiful because I'm not really a fan of that story. I don't really like it that much. That's the thing. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video and there'll be more to come. Bye guys.